going to show up on that screen? There we are. Perfect. Good evening, Littleton, and welcome to the Littleton Station Area Committee meeting for Thursday, August 5th, 2021. We're going to begin tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight's agenda includes a recap from the last Littleton Station Area Committee meeting, a discussion with police, fire, and the highway department representatives regarding to address resident concerns, and a review and discussion of summaries from other town departments, and then next steps. So just to recap the last meeting, and thank you, welcome everybody who's here in attendance tonight. The Littleton Station Area Committee met a few weeks ago, and what we did was we kind of recapped where we are currently in the process. As many of you may or may not know, this project's been going on for a few years now, and the Littleton Station Area Committee had been meeting pretty much, not weekly, but pretty close to that. And through that process, there was 3 public hearings, I believe, and there were many concerns of residents that were identified through that process. So what we did as a committee at the last meeting was we kind of talked about the areas of concern that residents had identified, and we developed a course of action going forward to address those concerns. And so what we decided to do was to invite in certain departments who are in charge of those areas, such as infrastructure, water, conservation, public safety, and just have a conversation with those department members to address some of the concerns of the residents. This evening, we're going to be meeting, like I said, with police, fire. Highway department will not be here this evening. Unfortunately, Chris Stoddard couldn't make it, so we're going to carry that over to a separate meeting, just because he has a pretty comprehensive presentation that he can provide to residents regarding sidewalk improvements and infrastructure improvements, especially on Foster Street. And then conservation's another group that we had talked about inviting in. After talking to Mr. Layden, who had spoken with Amy Green, it was decided that that would probably be best as a standalone meeting, because we feel that that's going to be a pretty comprehensive discussion and lengthy discussion as well. So that's where we're at currently in the process. Right now, we're just identified resident concerns, and we just want to try to mitigate those concerns or respond to those concerns one by one, just to help people have a better understanding of this project, but also let them know that we're listening to them. We're listening to the residents, and we want to address their concerns as best as we can. So to begin with, I'm going to call on Deputy Chief Patterson this evening to start off with police. And also we have interim Chief Clancy with us, Fire Chief Clancy with us this evening. So there have been concerns about the impact that this type of rezoning, a 40R development at the train station would have on the police and fire departments. And I've had some individual discussions with Chief Bernard about this, but I was just wondering if maybe you could provide some, starting with the police department, what kind of impact this type of rezoning and potential housing component would have on your department.
Well, again, Chief Bernard says his regrets. He's on vacation. I'm sure he doesn't regret it that much. He would have been here.
Yep.
As far as impacts on the department, obviously it's call volume. We're going to experience, a higher call volume that's going to affect our department. Right now, we are a 19-man full-time department, and we do have spots for 11 reserves, part-timers and stuff. Mm-hmm. In this type of development, taking a look at maybe, right now we have Pondside and we have Village Green in town. as far as, people living that close together and stuff. I believe it was in 2020, we went to Pondside a total of 352 times for calls for service.
Okay.
And right now, the first 6 months of this year, we're on a track of, we've been there 178 times, I believe,
Okay.
in the past 6 months. Looking at Village Green, which is a little, I believe a little smaller, but they have actually more floors. We've been, in 2020, we were there right around 155 times
Okay.
for calls for service. And this year, for the first 6 months, we're looking at 100 right now.
Okay.
So that's 6 months. Got a little more
Okay.
on track for the year.
The 19 full-time employees that you currently have, does that include you and the
Yes,
chief as well?
that's correct, yeah.
And is there any information about how many full-time officers your department should have? Is there a,
The standard is for every 1,000, about 2,000, there should be 2 officers. So we're actually right on line. Maybe, I think it's every 5,000, no, every 2,000. But we're right on line, on track, but what we're seeing now for call volume is, the point's getting busier. That affected us over the past 5 years. So we're still kind of playing catch-up as far as call volume and working towards handling the amount of traffic and everything. I think with the growth in town and the traffic coming back,
right.
as it is, we're going to be looking to add guys.
In the normal
Just
course.
from what we have.
Right, right.
So we'll be, obviously looking for that. You start adding more, more residents and more traffic and calls for service, and it might change what we're looking for.
Okay. All right, perfect, thank you. And Deputy Chief Clancy?
Interim chief.
Interim Chief, oh, I'm sorry, that's right.
I wish I was deputy.
I know.
Before we move on, can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
So the 375 odd calls to Pondside, how many calls total did you make last year? Like what percentage of the call volume is that?
I don't have
Yeah.
that information. I specifically concentrated on
Thank you.
that type of housing and that type of.
Okay. I'm just curious if it represents an unusual amount or it's disproportionate to the number of residents there versus other neighborhoods, or whether it's right in line, and if so, and also, like, let's say we double, like, we put another Pondside in the station, essentially, as far as population, like, what does that do to the overall volume? Is it a 1% increase or a 10% increase?
I can take a look at that.
I'd be really curious to see where that would come in.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I was thinking, actually, Chief Clancy.
Interim.
Would you just
I
call me?
know, I'm just
call me
I'm
Tom.
throwing it out there. I want it, almost
I have an
like,
identity crisis
Can
as it
you-
is right now, you know
I'm
what I
with
mean?
ya. Can you just go to the podium? 'Cause
Yeah,
I think
I'd be
that's the
happy
way we're set up with the microphones and
Yep.
everything.
Apologize.
So I apologize because I should have put.
Sorry,
it
thanks,
there.
man. It's okay. You don't have to move yet. It's okay. No, thank you.
Just
Thank you
my
for
mistake.
having me in here tonight. I appreciate that.
You want my phone?
Nah, that's okay. Yeah, because then I'd be taking a stand or something like that. So, when you're talking about an impact for high-density housing, demographics plays a role in it, obviously from a standpoint of, from the fire departments. All I did was, so with that respect, meaning you can get a population in there that doesn't require fire. Or you could have a couple people move in, and we're going there constantly. So for a point of reference, I used Village Green. I've got 3 4-story apartment complexes, and I went back from 2016. So since 2016 through a full year of 2021, we've had a 43% increase in responses to that facility, of which 58% of the total are for medicals. Now, that could be one individual living there, it could be a number. So, with a rental population, so with our software, the harder part is saying all the housing units that surround those. I'd have to type in each individual house to see how many times I went there. So for a point of reference, I used the apartment complexes because it's one address and but then broken down. So you're talking, this year we've been there we've had 35 responses there, of which 22 are medicals. So we've seen, 2016, we had 28 times we responded there, and through 2021, last year in 2020, it was 65. So each year it's gone up. But that, again, in this particular case, we're all, any increase in population, as Deputy Patterson said, is an increase in service, a call for service. And what we're experiencing is we have 16 full-time firefighter EMTs and paramedics, and we have right now just myself. So obviously we're in transition from that standpoint. But we also, whereas the police department has a reserve officer force, we have the call department. And right now my call department is less than 10 people. So I don't have them to rely on to augment my people when they respond. And it's a business model that's not presently working very well. So that being said, we would also, with any type of high density housing, we'd be in the same boat looking at how do we staff to maintain 2 ambulances and back-to-back calls, or it's a safety factor for us, just like it is for the police, For us, we have a 2 in, 2 out rule, meaning if 2 people go into a burning building, there should be 2 people outside to go in and get them. Currently, we have 4 people on duty, and we meet that, but it's the time when the ambulance is at Emerson Hospital and they get a call for service or a fire type call. And by that, I don't mean there's a fire, but a fire alarm at a housing complex like Village Green. I have 2 people responding and no one coming with them, unless I awake from my slumber, or and we always did that with the former chief and myself. We tried to fill that gap. It's just not a feasible solution. So the location of this obviously isn't the same as Village Green, which is like our farthest response time. That's about the farthest we run, is going to Village Green. From the fire station at Foster Street, that's a 5 to 6 minute response time down there without traffic. Here, the problem becomes running up and down a residential street to go down there. That's another thing that I think people are concerned about. I mean, we go to 191 Foster Street, but that's less than a mile from the fire station. Right. And we try not to do lights and sirens through there and that type of thing. But I guess that's how I look at it from the fire department standpoint, is it would be any type of high density housing is going to impact my staffing. And it's not like it would create the need to build a second station. That's not what I'm saying. But we'd have to look at as our population grows, how do we continue to provide service, and it's usually done through staffing.
Right.
So.
Right. And it sounds like in the normal course, there's a staffing.
Right now I do.
Anyways.
Yeah, especially this time of year. I have 3 people out on injury, and it's summertime. Okay. So I've been,
right.
It's, we're making we're providing the service.
Yeah.
It's just, it can't continue that way.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, these projects are exciting from a standpoint, but they also, there's a lot to consider, and I think that's what you're doing by having the meeting tonight, is to get people to hear everybody's concern and
right.
see how we do that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Do you have any questions for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I have a question. Let's say we didn't put high-density housing in there, and instead we put in warehouses, Amazon warehouses.
Yep.
What does that do? What kind of service level, difference in service level would that require?
So the difference is, you're not looking at, the difference is probably in the medical side of ours. Obviously, increase the population, you increase the chance of someone who has medical ailments or needs emergencies. That's 60+% of what we do is EMS. So warehousing like Amazon, you increase more traffic, more chances for car accidents. So again, another risk factor, but a totally different type
Right.
of risk factor.
Right.
So really, when you get into more commercial building, the bigger aspect becomes on inspection process. It's generally during construction, and that's handled through fire prevention.
Right.
But as a rule, now you get a commercial business that has 500 employees, then that's kind of, then you have more volume of traffic. So they present more of a traffic issue than
Right.
someone who lives there and elderly that falls. And that's what I see from Village Green, is we just have these spurts. Somebody's there, we go and we pick them up, or they have a chronic illness and we call and we transport them. And then they move out and eventually someone else moves in. I should, kudos to Jeff for using Pondside. I consider Village Green for us to be a little more, it just sticks out as me as a bigger place than Pondside, probably because it's been here so long and I just didn't take that into consideration. But
Okay,
does
so-
that answer your question?
Yeah, so the net of it seems like, look, this area is going to be developed one way or the other with something.
Something,
So if, let's say it remained light industrial warehouses, then you would foresee more traffic down Foster
Sure.
Street, and therefore, obviously, you could be called out more because there'd be more car accidents, blah,
Yep.
blah, blah, okay.
Yeah, but again, and then what do they put in there? I mean, nowadays it looks like warehousing is the way to go.
Right.
But, what if they do some type of light manufacturing with a hazardous component attached to it that's in a residential neighborhood? So then there's a whole another thing. But I don't see commercial as being such a high volume aspect as residential would be to us, or.
Well, it's
and
just different.
It's
Sounds
a
like
different type.
different.
Yeah, it's a different type of.
Either way, there would be an
risk.
impact.
Yeah, and then, like I said at the beginning, it's just hard to quantify from our standpoint because we rely on emergencies type of thing,
Right.
That's, we don't wish that on anyone, but that's what we're here for, so, to provide a service.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you know why the volume increased so much at Village Green over the last 5 years?
Again, it's been, there's been individuals in there that we've done a lot of medical runs to, and then you don't.
So it goes up and down?
It goes up and down, but ours really has been, Matthew, it dropped in 17, and it's been up since 18, 19, 20, and right now we're projected to be above, right now we're over halfway compared to last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I'm curious too, are elderly populations more likely to generate lots of calls, or is that not the case?
Well, yes, they do, because they're all trying to maintain their independence. So therefore, they kind of stay in a place where if they don't have help, they call on us, and that's what we're here to do. So a lot of falls. So for some people, it's picking them up, right? So
Yeah.
they call, or the wife can't pick them up, or we go there once and tell the spouse, or hey, do not try to lift them, just call us.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's to the point where we have to transport them. So the elderly population is definitely, that moves in. That's what we go to for at Village Green. It's
Yeah.
generally 3 to 4 elderly people that live there, families that live there, and we go to assist them however it might be, whether it's a transport, because they just get so sick. Most of the elderly population does not want to go to the hospital, so they hang in there until they don't have an
It's too
option,
late.
and that. But others, in particular, I want to say in 2020, it was one particular individual that we picked that person up quite a bit, and that's our job. We tell people, you can call us and we'll come down and we'll pick you up, and if you're not injured, we go back.
So those calls, they're repeat calls.
Yeah, some of them are. Yeah, it's repeat calls until they move,
Yeah.
right? And then it's the same at Pondside. It's the same, like 19 Shattuck Street had some housing out back that was run by Department of Public Health, and you ran through periods where you were there all the time, and then it stops, and then they get a new population in, and you're back there, so very sporadic. But all in all, call volume-wise, we were trending up until COVID. We had a drop in 2020, and now we're trending back up again.
To where you were?
Yeah, and it's Deputy President, it's the traffic. I mean, we're
Yeah.
back, they repaved Route 2, and when you get more than an inch of rain, go look at the guardrail at Meyer Munker, 112.2. We were there 3 times today. So, and they're not fixing the guardrail now. They're done.
They're just like, it just gets hit too often?
It's a corner, and they paved it, and the water goes from the breakdown lane to the high-speed lane. The cars come down the hill just before Taylor Street, and they hit that, spin out, and today, had it not been a smart car, they're pretty certain the car would have gone through the guardrail into the westbound lane.
Oh, no.
But, and we had
Are
on,
they gonna fix that?
hey, I don't know, it's Mass DOT, you
Yeah.
know, but
3
on,
times today, and the
Yeah.
last time it rained heavy.
Noah's Ark Friday, I called it. The day we had 5 inches of rain, 6 calls to the same mile marker between 8 and 12:30.
Wow.
Every time they cleared it and traffic could go 80 again in the pouring rain, they spun out. Yeah, we transported 4 people that day.
Oh, my gosh.
And it, but we didn't, from April to July or whatever, last summer, I mean, you could drive over 495 and there was no traffic.
Yeah.
So that's why that was our volume drop last year, so.
So Matthew, I just wanted to point out one thing, that now that we've taken off that parcel next to the Life Care Center,
Yeah.
we're not gonna have the kind of, the elderly
Right, right, yeah.
population. So I just wanted.
Well, but we were talking also about including a senior component or some senior housing in the development.
Well, not I mean,
Not-
not age-specific, not necessarily
Yeah.
age-specific, it's gonna be more, just smaller
Yeah.
units. Now, seniors
No,
move
no,
in,
I'm saying
great,
appropriate
but
to
yeah,
seniors, yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry, my last question is, so you talked about going to Life Care Center, and you sort of said it's pretty close. You feel like it's close to the station.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then this wouldn't be that much further away. I mean, it's another,
I
what,
know-
like quarter mile
What
down
I
the
mean,
road?
Matthew, is like, it's more residential driving.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
okay,
And then
yeah.
the road, and I know the road's gonna get widened or however that works, but it's still, nobody likes to see emergency
No.
trucks going through their neighborhood,
Okay.
or even the fact that, it'll be more inspections, which that's par for the course if they're building something. But in this case, it's just golf analogy. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so it's more just I'm looking at emergency response to a residential neighborhood. It's just like when the point opened. We started using Russell Street to respond to that side of town, and I finally said, stop going down Russell Street. If we had a call on Gilson Road, it's faster to go Russell Street. So we go through the Common now, but that's because I didn't want, 6 times a day, the fire trucks and the ambulance going
Right.
with the lights on
So
through
what
a
about-
residential neighborhood,
Right,
which
so
has
what about
more
Turkey
increased
Farm?
traffic. Turkey Farm is
Have
not.
you seen a lot of?
No, it's a different demographic with that type of building. They're $800,000-900,000 homes, and it's the smoke detector going off, right? When they move in and they wake up, they only go off at night when you're sleeping, and then so we go there for that, no smoke or fire. But I wouldn't say since that's been built, I can generate the data, but I don't think it'll show much of any that type of housing, because you could have 2 people in one of those 4-bedroom houses versus an apartment, a 1, 2, and 3 apartment complex. You're going to get a higher density of people.
So is it really demographic, or is it just a density
It's
issue?
That's what I was gonna ask.
I think for a apartment, for high density, like I'll compare it to Village Green. It's both. It's the density and the demographic, because you're increasing. From our standpoint, you're increasing the odds that you'll get someone who needs more medical attention than someone. I'm using
Well, with an older population.
with anything.
Just
You
having
could have
that
it with a
many
younger.
people living in that.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's
it's,
what I mean.
so it's density.
It's a density.
It's not a demographic.
Well, when I say demographic, it's because there's people, they may have medical issues and they move here because they can live with their mother in an apartment, but something to that effect. I'm saying it's just a hard thing to quantify, but it can be also because you have more people in one place, you increase the risk,
Right.
or you increase the chance that you're going to get someone with medical conditions that requires us to go there a lot. Does that clarify it? And I guess by using the demographics, I mean, But you also have some demographics that they don't call 911 no matter what, because they may have come here to the United States, and from the country they immigrated from, they don't trust people. We run into that a lot, where they don't trust public safety and they won't call. So they won't call an ambulance to come, even they'll take them
Right.
themselves. So that's what I mean by
They're
demographics.
afraid they'll never come back.
You've got some people, they just don't trust, there's a trust factor, because you don't have the type of 911 system we have in the United States in every country. So when they come here, they don't trust it, so they don't call us.
Well, it sounds like irrespective, it's hard to quantify it.
It is,
I
it
mean,
is.
we know there's gonna be an impact, but we can't really put
A hard
set
figure on it.
number,
Right.
a hard number on it.
And the type of calls, like he's saying, the disturbances, because you're living on one on
Yeah.
top of another and
Yeah.
stuff, they take longer for our officers to handle,
Right,
because they have to mediate between people that, they're like putting up for this, and by the time they call us, they're really irritated and agitated. And then we approach the person that got called on, and that sets them off.
right,
So we're there a lot longer for the
Right.
type of calls that you do, so.
Now,
right.
you had said that it's typically 2 officers for every 1,000 residents, right?
Yeah, I gotta look that up exactly, but yeah, we are right now probably just under what we're supposed to be at by the national standards.
Okay.
So that's why I'm saying I gotta look up the numbers exactly on that.
And so what about looking at the fire department? How many full-time firefighters should you have per 1,000 residents, let's say? Like, is there some sort of ratio?
No, like I said, we go by the National Fire Protection Association. They set standards for the fire service versus, so there's standards on span of control, like how many firefighters can one officer handle effectively, and that is, so I have lieutenants. I have a lieutenant on each shift. I have 4 shifts and 4 firefighters. He has 3 people in his span of control. That span of control for one lieutenant is 5.
Okay.
After 5, that he's no longer effective as the standard goes.
Right.
And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's another standard that is the 2 in, 2 out rule, meaning if there's 2 firefighters inside a burning building, there should be 2 people outside to go in and rescue them if needed. And what we do now is we have 4 people on duty, but we all rely on mutual aid, which is coming.
But I would think that there's still some sort of standard number of firefighters per number of residents. Because when you're talking about span of control, that's just a hierarchy. That doesn't really tell me how many firefighters, let's say a population of 10,000 people needs.
Right, and I'm not certain I don't think there's a hard number for that, because that would be something that would come up in, say, collective bargaining agreements and negotiations. Again, it's going to be, I will look into it before I go and say there's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause-
from my experience, there's never been a number that you say, hey, if you have 10,000 people in your town, you need this many full-time firefighters. Because we're talking, there's 2 different, you can have a town our size and they have a call department. They don't have full-time people.
Right. I guess that what I'm trying to get to is, all right, let's say you add 500 residents to a town.
Yep.
What does that equate in terms of the number of new firefighters you would need, or the number of new police?
See, I think what's happening now, and I
Yeah,
think
go
the
ahead.
fire service probably has done it more than the police has. So using the 2 for every 1,000 rule, we should be at 20, so we're just under. But what has changed a lot in like the Chiefs Association and stuff like that for the country is they're looking at call volume instead of looking at the
Population.
number of population.
Right,
Because
yeah, that
the
makes
calls
sense.
take time.
Right,
So if you look at your call volume and the type of calls, I believe we have done that. We did a whole study and put together something, probably within the past 2 years, that showed we needed 25 officers for our call volume.
okay.
So I think I think the fire service has kind
Is
of gotten
kinda
away
doing-
from a hard population number, probably before we did. And now you're seeing that the police departments are shifting from that in the country, because you have to take a look at how long your officers are at a call. Because at a disturbance call, we send 2 officers, because sending one it's just dangerous, because you don't know what's gonna happen, because there's always 2 or 3 or more people there. So we always send at least 2 officers. So then you're looking at 2 officers tied up at a disturbance call for 20, 30 minutes. And we only have 3 to 4 officers on during the day, and 3 to 4 officers on 3 to 11, and 2 late nights, 11 to 7.
Okay.
So you're tying up, late nights, you're tying up your whole shift. So if something else comes in, we have to go to mutual aid and hope a surrounding town has more on. Foxborough could only have 1 on. Harvard could only have 1 on. So we rely on Air and Westford. Foxborough does help us out a lot, and we help them.
And based on the conversation we just had, it's very hard for you to predict what kind of call volume 500 new residents are going to generate, because it varies wildly with demographics, density, and,
Yep.
Exactly.
and location.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say as we keep growing,
Yeah.
that we're all gonna need
Right.
more people.
Right.
Just because, like I said, in our case, the call department, it's a lot of training, it's a lot, and the people moving into town, that's just not their gig, is to be a call firefighter for $12 to $14 an hour and get up in the middle of the night to go to a fire alarm investigation and then be at Fidelity 8 a.m. bringing smile. I'm using that as an example, but I have a guy from Fidelity, work for Fidelity on the call department, but I end up with, and then if I get someone younger that's still living at home, I train them up, but guess what they do? They either get a job in the fire service somewhere or they move. And I have nobody in the middle. So it's hard. And, people go on vacation and I can't force them to come to a call. And it's a safety factor for us now. But that's how I look at it. Any type of growth, if we accept a public road, Chris is going to need another person to plow it. You know what I mean? It's just
Right.
it
It's
has
hard to
that effect.
quantify it, yeah.
Yeah.
We got to stop telling everybody how awesome Littleton is, so they just won't
I
come. That's
know,
what
right?
Portland, Oregon did years ago. They said, don't come here, it's terrible, right? That's how they do it.
All right,
So,
perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
You're welcome. So I know that there's members of the public here. While we have Interim Chief Clancy and Deputy Chief Patterson in the room, I'm wondering if anybody has a specific question for either one of them. If you do, please raise your hand and feel free to come to the podium. State your name and address. You can come on up, sir. Just provide your name and address and address your question to them.
Actually, it's not for them.
Oh,
Excellent.
I thought he was going to ask me my golf handicap.
I always get you back.
Public.
yeah.
So Jim Toole, 141 Foster Street. So I think it's great you guys are doing this. I think it's very helpful. And I think your questions are great. The additional question I would ask you to try and figure out as well, because part of this whole 40R thing is because there's going to be significant cost savings, right? But I don't think with police or fire, you asked about, how much more they're going to have to invest with adding in, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, because I probably am wrong. I think it's 70 condos and 300 apartments. Is that about right? 200 apartments?
I
can't remember.
I believe that's from the old proposal.
Yeah.
now
And
it's-
that's been reduced down to eliminate the condo portion. I don't believe Martin had distributed yet, sort of like
All
a
good.
concept,
That's not the important-
reducing it down.
Right, that's not the important part, but I think one thing that would be nice to understand for you folks and for all of us is, okay, if we're gonna put this thing in and actually go down this path with highway department and everything else, you're looking at vehicles, you're looking at staff, you're looking at, probably, paid time off and everything else. So what's the cost factor? And does that make it actually beneficial to go down this path that far, as opposed to maybe putting in a warehouse, which may or may not increase, as much as putting in all these apartments?
That's what, you certainly will have a lot more traffic on Foster Street with a warehouse.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay.
And I'm not even
So-
getting,
Okay.
I'm not getting into traffic at all, because the highway department isn't here, and it would be unfair to even bring that question up. That's just not a relevant question at this point. But I do feel that just sort of understanding some of the costs, not just the people, is a benefit to everybody to sort of understand what we're getting into, because maybe it turns out that the 40R savings we get go right out the door when we start adding more people, adding more vehicles, more people on staff, and, so.
But you realize that the reason we're interested in putting this in is because we're looking to diversify the housing stock in Littleton.
Yep,
Okay.
not against it.
So, okay.
Never, I'm not against it.
So we're not putting in 40R because of cost savings. We're putting it in because the residents are saying, we have got to have different diversified housing, so.
Yep, and I don't disagree with any of that. But again, there was a comment made on one of the 2 or 3 meetings I've been in where there was a point made that the 40R would have some significant cost savings if we did it. So,
I think what you might be referring to is that we actually would get money from the state.
Yeah, it's the
Yep.
40S payments, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is what you're referring
Yep.
to.
Right.
And I remember that comment,
Yeah.
and I remember thinking to myself, that money means nothing. I mean,
it could.
Well, I mean, it's really insignificant.
It would-
In the
yeah.
scheme of things, I just think, and it kind of deflects from the purpose for this whole project, which is to create housing, to diversify our housing
Yep.
stock. So I agree with you 100%. And, to do that cost, we're not going to call it cost benefit analysis or
Sure,
something.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, I know,
Whatever
because
floats.
it's true, because with new staff, I'm going to use the police department as an analogy.
Yep.
You hire new officers, well, guess they need a vehicle.
Right.
And so there's a lot to take into consideration with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep,
Health
so-
insurance benefits, pensions, all of that stuff,
Yep.
so.
That's
Yeah,
that's
no,
all
I
I want to
agree
bring
with
up,
you.
that,
Yeah.
I think it's great, like I said, it's great that you guys are doing this, because
Yeah.
I think it helps benefit the entire project as a whole,
Right.
not just for the town, but for the people in the town,
Right.
So,
Right.
again, it's just, we should be looking to make sure that we're not gonna, for lack of a better way to put it, stepping on ourselves, for trying to do something like this and not realizing the entire cost of it.
Right, yeah,
So-
exactly.
I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is considering what else, like, this area is going to be developed, this plot's going to be developed, I think.
Sure it is.
One way or another.
Yeah.
And we have a situation where the landowner is very interested in working with the town, and honestly, probably making less money than they would otherwise. So they could just do what, they could build another Durkee farm there and probably make more money. But they're willing to work with us to make something that not only benefits the town in terms of diversity, but the state is very interested in it because of the MBTA and so forth.
Yep.
So I guess I would see the 40S payments or any other grants we get or assistance with the senior center as gravy, but we have a chance to create a development which is appropriate to the space and adds diversity, because we're in this unique situation with a landowner who wants to work with us and seems genuinely interested in creating something that's, I'm going to say, I don't know, attractive is maybe not the right word, but appropriate and not, I don't want it to be Avalon. I'm going to say that right out, and I'm sorry if the developer of Avalon's in the room, but that kind of thing is enormous, and it's kind of a generic box. And I believe that many of the sort of the vision that we have of it is much more of a small community with green space and roads and so forth, with the giant apartments not being like looming over Foster Street. That's what I hope will happen.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I'm not against any of it, I'm just trying to make sure that everything is looked at and that this doesn't become a huge burden for the town as a whole. So, look at the number of people, do a cost-benefit analysis or whatever. Just be sure that we're making the right moves doing this. Foster Street is tiny. You walk on Foster Street every morning.
Yeah.
And luckily, the times I see you, you're on where there's a sidewalk.
Yeah, I know.
But, but that whole piece we should wait on, because honestly speaking, you know, I read the online documents, there are things that I see that are missing, but that's a discussion for another time when the highway department's here and can actually, but, you know, again, you're right, it is gonna be developed as something. What it's gonna be, I have no idea, and I'm not for or against anything, but I wanna be sure that we're not stepping in doo-doo when we do this, and that we make sure that, you know, we're looking at all the different costs and how it's gonna change the town and how it's gonna affect the people. So, that's all.
Excellent.
Thank you.
so much.
Also, I rode my bike on Foster Street for about 10 years to the train station, and I'm going to tell you, getting off the train from Boston in the evening when there are also 65 cars driving past you on Foster Street as you're struggling up that hill, that wasn't fun.
All that's going to change once we get that
It's too late.
big, well, it's
I
true.
don't drive.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Anyway,
Okay, excellent.
thank you. But thank you for that. That was actually, I appreciate your question. You know, I think it's very fair. It's, we have to approach it that way.
Yeah, that's a good question. You want to come to the microphone and just state your name and
And your address, please?
Sure. Can you hear me okay through my mask?
Yeah.
Maybe this visual won't work. I am Kim Mayo, 148 Towerwood Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening in person. I'm not sure I can be at the next meeting with vacation, so I'm going to address some of the concerns by our police and fire chief, and then some others that may not be as pertinent to their comments, again, because I'm not sure if I'll be here. One concern off the bat is that the higher taxes and back-end costs stemming from the influx of new residents will strain budgets, making it more costly for current residents to live. We heard tonight, if I understood correctly, the increase in population logically equals an increase in calls for service and an increase to staffing needs for first responders. This project also puts lives at risk by failing to provide adequate traffic and first responder studies. I know before it was taken off the warrant in June, we didn't see anything of that nature.
Can you just hold on 1 second, please? There wasn't a traffic study done? There wasn't a discussion about that?
No, that was going to come afterwards.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, so that would be part of the,
yeah.
that wouldn't be part.
Exactly.
Because this is just basically, just to clarify for 1 second, this is a rezoning proposal. We don't have an actual
Right.
housing proposal before us right now. That would come through the planning board and that whole process.
So
that
there would have to be a traffic study before anything was approved to
before
be
anything was
built.
permitted or approved, so that wouldn't be part of this phase of the project, just to
Right, I
clarify
understand
your
that, but it
comment.
just feels like blind faith to me. You're asking residents to accept something in the absence of any sort of traffic study. It also diminishes the value of Bumblebee Park, Mill Hill, Town Forest, Newtown Hill for both humans and wildlife, which represent decades of taxpayer investment to purchase and protect the land, and I'm really
Can you
interested in
just
hearing more
how
from
does
the
it diminish
conservation.
that value?
But also, we're here to discuss police and fire.
Yeah.
But I just said that I'm not sure I'll be at the meeting when Ms. Green and.
Okay, but
so
I'm
it's-
sorry about that, but we are here
Just in
to
the,
specifically discuss fire and
yeah,
police.
while we have them
This is
in
a
the room.
working committee.
Because actually, to be honest with you, Ms. Mayo, I've heard your comments before. We have public hearings where your comments were presented. They've been on social media, they've been submitted in writing to the planning board. We have all of those comments, so you're just reiterating what you've already brought before us. So if you have any questions for the police or fire department, you're more than welcome to ask those questions now.
Yes, I did also want to state when we talk about volume that as of February 2019, more than 8 out of 10 communities still fall short of 10% affordable housing. Almost 50% have less than 5%, and 42 towns have zero affordable housing. It's definitely a very worthy concept, but Littleton is at 13%, exceeding requirements.
Right, so I'm just going to ask you again, this isn't a time for you to make a public statement. This is a time to address a question to the police and fire department. If you don't have a question for them, then I'm just going to ask you to sit down, please.
Yes, I do have a question for them. Just give me a moment, please, we'll hear more about protected space, protected lands when the Conservation Commission comes in. Do you have a date set for that?
We do not yet.
Okay. So I would ask the fire and police chiefs their thoughts, the fact that we currently have hundreds of thousands of square feet of underutilized and vacant commercial space in town, and issues with the water supply. Does it really make sense to destroy 50 acres of hardwood forest to build this when we have all that open, underutilized and vacant space in town, both at the point and across the train path?
I don't see that as a question for me to answer. We're here to talk about the public safety and the aspects of how it will affect us.
I can address the water, I'm sorry, I can address the water supply question, if you don't mind me reading the email from
No,
Corey.
in fact, thank you. Yes,
Okay.
yes, if you could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Corey Godfrey from Littleton Water Department, we actually asked him to attend and he couldn't, but he did send this statement to the board, to this committee regarding this development. And here it is, quote, "As long as the denser development is offset by open space protection elsewhere, such that the total amount of impervious surface in the aquifer and/or watershed is not increased beyond what would have been otherwise allowed, then water quality impacts to the aquifer should be minimal. In terms of water supply availability, minimizing large sprawling lawns with irrigation systems by focusing on denser development without irrigation is definitely preferable. If we are talking specifically about the Foster Street train station area, this is outside of the Aquifer Protection District, but within the Water Resource District. It is not likely that this area would ever be served by the proposed town sewer system, so a separate private system will most likely be installed there. There are not any specific concerns about an on-site disposal system in that location at this time."
Thank you, Matthew. And I would ask him or the gentleman, ask you or the gentleman who just made that statement, wouldn't light industrial be preferable to high density?
I can ask.
Do you have any other questions for the police or fire department?
I may have one more. I'm just reading my chicken scratch from tonight. They gave a lot of great feedback, and I'm just trying to read my handwriting. It just sounds like quite a few calls for service with Pondside, 178 year-to-date, 100 for Village Green, and I would think that that would increase exponentially with the type of density that we're talking about on Foster. Perhaps how much is an unknown at this point. That's all I have for this evening. Thank you, Fire Chief and Police Chief and board members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, excuse me, Madam Chair, if you wouldn't mind me just chiming in, just so I can describe the graphic on the screen for everyone.
Sure.
So, because it came up at the last meeting, and, as far as, well, we have all this industrial land, we have buildings that aren't utilized. One of the reasons why we're also looking at this site is that, as the committee knows, the state approved legislation that basically essentially mandates higher density residential around commuter rail stations within half mile. That's what this circle represents. Area within half mile of the MBTA commuter rail. So you can see within this area, while it looks like there's a lot of parcels, and on the screen you may not be able to see, but if you viewed this as a clock, between 9 o'clock and midnight is essentially all wetlands. Down between sort of like in the 7 o'clock area along Foster Street, that building's actually fully occupied and they're looking at expanding. And then we have a bunch of residential properties, the New K and Durkee Estates, as well as open space that was acquired as part of those approvals from the planning board. So what is sort of like the parcel that is then remaining out there? It's actually this one that we're looking at for the 40R. This legislation basically identifies minimum density of 15 units per acre. 40R was coming in at 20. We could use different options for density under 40R if we wanted to look at that as well. And that specifies, not more than half a mile. So this is the geographic area that we need to look at for something. We can either fall under this and, here there's no age restrictions, and also that it needs to be suitable for families. So the reason why you are looking at this is not only because of the master plan efforts and then the Littleton Station Area Plan efforts that identified something here. We also have legislation that will negatively impact the town. The town has, even most recently for the sewer effort, received $1.5 million grant through MassWorks for work on that. The state unfortunately ties many of its efforts to grant programs. So we would have to either adopt zoning that meets this minimum requirements for an area in that area to then be eligible for grants, or forego grants, which quite often not only helps with some of our public safety efforts, but physical infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, but then also other quality of life programs. Could be open space protection, because we can apply for state grants for that, as well as, quite frankly, a lot of green community and energy efficiency efforts that the town has been fortunate to almost receive $600,000 being a green community. So there's always these carrots and sticks. This is a stick that the state is saying you need to adopt this type of zoning to then get the other carrots of the grants, but that also enters into the conversation that we're looking at this project.
Right.
So it definitely adds another layer of conversation. And the last thing is that unless the town owns land, that's the only way to protect it. All of the land that the planning board has approved projects that then designates the open space, offsetting some development with permanent protection, that land at least is permanently protected. But if the town doesn't own it, it's going to be developed somehow. That's where the planning board is used to balancing these efforts, private, property rights and development that's allowed by the bylaw versus mitigating impacts of a development to residents, and then also trying to look at other ways to try to protect some of the character and so that we can accommodate and mitigate any of the development that occurs.
Right. So basically, it's going to be, this area is going to be developed. We can do it on our terms, or we can do it on the state's terms.
Yeah, and this parcel is zoned industrial, and that's correct. And yeah, there's pluses and minuses to that as well.
Right.
We've seen just within town, and we've seen a lot of towns where distribution is increasing, but that's something that we do have some projects in the pipeline that will probably be going to the planning board on that industrial type use and scale. Here we do have a property owner that at least has followed the process, is interested in sort of the results of the master plan process for consolidating development and preserving open space, as well as then providing housing options to the town.
Well, and I think it's also important to remember, and you mentioned this, Matthew, this is right next to a train station where people commute into the city. So if people can live there and commute, that reduces the number of cars on the highways, which Lord knows we certainly need. So I think we've got to keep that in mind, that this is the perfect place to put residential.
Right.
Versus like light industrial. Yeah.
I mean, I think we could ask our building commissioner, Mr. Mullen. We had a conversation, I think, at the last station area where someone mentioned the underutilized or vacant office, commercial space, and you, I think, said essentially that's not the case.
That is not the case.
So can you expand on that?
Every single building in that area on Foster Street and on Taylor Street has an occupant in it. And most of them, like the one pointed out at 295 Foster Street, is fully occupied and they're looking to expand.
Yeah.
So they're all being used.
Who's at 295?
It's It's a bunch of different corporate offices within the building,
Oh, okay,
but it's fully occupied.
okay.
Are there swaths of, office space or commercial space that is unoccupied?
If you go further up Foster towards Taylor, those buildings have occupants, but they're not fully
They're not
occupied.
fully done? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
I think it was at our last select board meeting.
I think, was it our select board meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, all right, good. So thank you, interim chief. Nancy. Did I get it right?
I gotta borrow Kim's side and put my title.
Deputy Chief Patterson, I appreciate you taking the time to come
promoting
talk
you.
with us. Thank you.
Thank you both.
And so we had the highway department on the agenda, but Mr. Strada could not make it this evening. So he is we're gonna schedule him to come to a future meeting. And the other area that we were gonna talk about was the water department, right? Didn't we have, thank you. We had that
Yeah,
summary
just that email
from
was
Corey, right?
Yeah.
the only info I had.
Had they submitted like a specific responses to?
That was essentially what they
basically it.
replied.
All right, perfect.
He also indicated that he can attend at a future
Okay.
meeting, so.
All right, good. Okay, so going forward, we're going to bring in conservation. We're going to have that, we're going to bring conservation, highway, water we have already addressed, and
Unless do you
public.
have any questions? Do you want to bring him in? Do you want to bring water in for questions?
It might be
or-
not a bad idea to have someone here in case the public has questions about the water supply.
Okay,
I mean, if it's possible, I don't think we can require it, but it would be nice.
okay, so at the next meeting, we'll invite conservation, highway, and water.
Okay.
And give the public a opportunity to hear from them and ask them any questions.
So do we want to look at calendars?
Yeah, we should probably do that. Over here.
Were we trying to do the Mondays?
Yeah, we're trying to do, it was my mistake that we didn't get on for this Monday.
So the next one would be the 16th of this month?
Well, the 16th, we have a planning board meeting.
Okay.
So,
The 30th?
but we could do it later let's look at later that week. Hold on.
We have Affordable Housing Trust on Tuesday.
Okay, so what about Wednesday?
I think it's okay with me.
Wednesday's fine with me.
We're just
That's
gonna
the
see if this
18th.
room's available.
Okay. So maybe if we pick a couple of dates,
Okay.
so maybe Wednesday, the 18th, or,
Do you want to try Thursday, the 19th, or do you have planning board, or is,
I know.
what?
I realized I was looking for something on the 18th. Sounds familiar.
Oh, it does?
I'm trying to remember what that is. Well, I was looking to see if someone sent me something that I
It's-
just didn't accept yet because I
Okay.
don't. Oh, but that was at 4:30. Okay.
I can't
Yeah.
do the 19th.
okay,
So, and then the 23rd, you guys, the select board hasn't meeting,
Correct.
right, on the 23rd?
so then that leaves the 30th.
Well, no, but I could do, the 24th, we have MPEC.
Yeah.
The
25th?
25th? 25th, I'm good.
Okay, so we'll try for Wednesday, the 18th,
Or
or
Wednesday, the
the
25th.
25th, just depending on room availability. I'll email Diane and ask her.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, at
Yep.
5:30.
Yeah, I like the 5:30.
Oh, I love the 5:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
My thing that I thought was on the 18th is actually from 4:30 to 5:30, so I'd be
Oh,
available. so.
perfect. All right, good. So that's what we'll do. Those are the next steps for this group. I
Great.
think that concludes our meeting for this evening.
I move that we adjourn. Or do we have to make a
Second.
motion?
I know,
I don't know.
With committee in it?
I don't know. Yeah, why don't you just second it?
I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Great, perfect.
Thank you.
All right, great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for
everybody.
coming.